the odds of the issues you're struggling with right now being resolved by chance are close to zero. It may happen. There may be some of you listening right now who have had issues, struggles with work or relationships or money or whatever in the past, and they just magically resolve themselves. But most of the time they don't. And if you don't pay attention to it, they get worse. Welcome to the Ignited Recovery Podcast, a new way forward for anyone looking for answers but feeling left out. If you've been searching for empowerment, triumph, and purpose, you've found them right here. You won't hear the same solutions, and you're not going to have any excuses to fall back on, because Ignited Recovery allows heroes to rise and become their best selves. I'm Dr. Adi Jaffe, and I can't wait to be your guide on this journey. Are you ready to become an ignited hero? Hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of the Ignited Recovery Secrets Podcast. I'm Adi Jaffe, and I'm going to go back to some more addiction-related stuff, although God knows there's a lot going on in the world that we need to address. But we are currently wrapping up our Family SOS Program, the first program we've run for the family members of those who struggle. And it has been one of the most incredible experiences I've ever had. And I can't wait for this program to be more widely available for people, because for the first time, and I've been in this business for 15 years, I got to work almost exclusively with the family members of those who struggle. And I've worked so much with the people who struggle with addiction themselves that I got to give them a perspective that is different than what they had imagined, and also stay open-minded to their own struggles and understand what they're going through in their efforts to try to, change the world and change the lives of their loved ones. So we had wives who have husbands who are drinking or doing drugs or doing other things that they shouldn't be doing, or that are hurting the relationship. Forget shouldn't be doing, just hurting the relationship. We have parents with children who've kind of gone astray. We've got siblings who are trying to help other siblings who are in harm's way and are just acting in ways that are not supportive of them being able to be successful long-term in their life. And it's powerful stuff, and what's beautiful and what it brought the point for me, and maybe this is relevant for some of you, which is why I'm recording it here for you today, is that both sides of the equation are almost struggling with the same thing at the same time. And the problem is that nobody has figured out how to connect the dots and bridge those two sides of the conversation in a healthy way. I want to explain what I mean here, and I'll use an example. I'm going to take all names and all kind of specifics out of the situation, but one of the wives in this is talking about what's going on with her husband, and he's been drinking. He drinks a lot. He goes out later in the night, like at I don't even know, it's like 10 or 11 o'clock, and we'll go drinking and then come home incredibly late and maybe be disruptive, but also obviously belligerently drunk, etc., pass out, and the cycle keeps repeating and repeating and repeating. And every time that she's tried to address it, every time she's tried to talk about it, every time she's tried to do anything about it, he either gets really incensed and upset and angry that she's bringing it up, or he gets apologetic and say, yeah, I totally know I screwed up. I gotta, we'll have to deal with this, and pushes it off to dealing with it another time. And I mean, if you've ever had somebody who struggles with addiction, you know exactly the sort of interaction she's talking about, right? It's every morning if you talk about, hey, what happened last night? They go, oh my God, I feel so terrible. I'm so sorry. I won't do it again. But if you try to push, there's not really a lot of acceptance. There's not really a lot of opportunity for discussion. And if you've heard any of my stuff before, you know that they are laden with shame, right? They are layered with so much shame around their own actions, and removing that shame and avoiding it and not looking at it face on is a huge part of why they're avoiding even the conversation. So they'd rather just run off to work, go to the gym, do whatever it is they need to do to not address this problem. And then what happens is, for a lot of these families, they walk on eggshells. And if the loved one comes back, and in this situation, this would happen repeatedly, as long as he comes back and it's quiet and there's no offending and there's no screaming and all that isn't happening, it seems like things are better. And so nobody wants to address it again. Everybody wants to be quiet and kind of just go with the flow because things are kind of working okay right now. And, we don't want to rock the boat. So nobody rocks the boat. And for maybe a day, maybe 2 days, maybe a week, maybe a month, maybe 6 months, it's okay. And then it blows up again. And then we repeat the cycle. And that cycle repeats over and over and over and over and over. And one of the things that we just identified in one of the most recent sessions is that the loved ones are so scared of dealing with the issue because when they try to do it, there's so much pushback that they end up avoiding it. And so just like the person who's struggling with the addiction avoids it, they avoid it, but for different reasons, right? They're not avoiding it because they feel shame around the behavior. They're avoiding it because they're hopeful that they can just sweep it under the rug and that things will work out. Or they're hopeful that they can stretch this period of quiet and contentment and joy in the house for a little bit longer. But what happens, and if you ever listen to the conversations that Sophie and I have had about relationships, this is the problem with that way of thinking. The odds of the issues you're struggling with right now being resolved by chance are close to zero. It may happen. There may be some of you listening right now who have had issues, struggles with work or relationships or money or whatever in the past, and they just magically resolve themselves. But most of the time they don't. And if you don't pay attention to it, they get worse, right? Like if there's a patch on your grass that isn't getting water because the sprinkler's not hitting it, just ignoring it will not make more water end up there, and the grass will die eventually. And once the grass dies, you have a lot harder of a job to fix that area. And that's the point that we were getting across yesterday in the chat. We've got to stop avoiding. And that's for all of us. If your loved one is struggling with addiction and you're going through this back and forth cycle, let's be clear about something. You need to stop avoiding the problem yourself. You need to stop believing that it's going to fix itself. Now, does that mean you need some professional support on how to navigate it? Maybe. We talked a lot about boundaries in the program that same session, and maybe you haven't set boundaries ever. Maybe you set boundaries and not consistent. Maybe you only set boundaries when things explode, and so the boundaries are like, if you ever do that again, I will kick you out, the ultimatum sort of boundary. Well, those don't really work out unless you're really willing to follow up on an ultimatum. So what I realized was that there is work to do on both sides. I've been working with the people around addiction for so long. We always knew that there's environmental and social and familial pressure, etc. Like that was obvious, and we've talked about it here. That's not news. But it was really interesting to see how much the other side struggles even to directly deal with the problem. Because here's what's funny, right? We talk about addicts as liars. We talk about addicts as unmotivated. We talk about addicts as being lazy. But if I'm honest about it, the other side has the exact same struggles. They pretend like things are okay when they're not. They'll suspect drinking but won't talk about it until it's incredibly obvious. They have feelings of resentment but won't bring it up because they don't want to rock the boat. They'll be asked, is everything okay? And they'll say, yeah, everything's fine. Lying, but, glossing over issues. And just like in relationships, Sophie and I, when we talk about radical transparency, just like in relationships where that's exactly when you need to talk, right? If something happens with your partner, let's say you go away on vacation, you come back and something feels odd and you suspect something. Have the conversation. Sit them down and say, hey, I feel uncomfortable. Something has come up in me. I have emotions. Sit down and figure it out, because that's the only way you're going to have an opportunity to have a real conversation. In a bizarre way, I see a parallel between what I just said and what's happening racially and generally in our society right now, with this place we've come to where people are just so uncomfortable having uncomfortable conversations, they'd rather just avoid them. So we block the people who don't see things the way that we see them. We ignore them. We avoid them. Or maybe we talk to them, but we pretend like everything is fine, right? We do this in our own lives over and over and over. Nothing gets fixed this way, people. Nothing gets fixed. So if you're ready to leave your partner, or you're ready to kick out your son, or you're ready to never talk to your mom and dad because their addiction, their drinking, whatever it is that they do pisses you off so much, then by all means cut off the relationship. But if you're going to stay in your relationship, it is your duty the same as it's the other person's duty to be honest and transparent. Yes, even when it's uncomfortable. Yes, even when around the breakfast table you bring it up and they go, I don't want to talk about it right now. Okay, well then when do you want to talk about it? Because this is affecting our lives, it's affecting my life, it's affecting the life of our kids. I'm not letting it go because it matters. It's not just people with addiction who struggle with discomfort. We live in this society of quick, easy fixes. And if it's not quick and easy, then we don't want to touch on it. That's why this racism thing is so tough. That's why criminal justice is so tough. That's why talking about drugs and alcohol is so tough for people. We just want it to go away, but guess what? It's not going to. And just telling somebody, hey, I told you not to drink anymore is not a way to fix their fucking drinking. Sorry, I had to let one slip out. It's not. Your loved one is drinking for a reason. They're using for a reason. Telling them not to do it anymore is not going to fix that reason. So sit down and have the weird conversations. You guys haven't slept in the same room for 15 years? Well, that's a problem. What's happening in the relationship? They don't talk to their parents and they get mad every time that their mom calls because they were abused by their dad. That's a problem. You're going to need to talk about it. Every time they come back from work, they feel worthless and like losers and it doesn't matter what they do because nothing's ever going to be good enough. We got to talk about it. Stop pretending like there's nothing going on. Stop pretending like there's nothing wrong when you know deep inside that there are deep-rooted issues that everybody needs to address. As a society, as a race, as a species, if we can understand that discomfort does not mean avoidance, you don't move away from everything you're uncomfortable with. There are uncomfortable things that you have to do in order to move yourself forward. I think we'll be in a much, much better place a few years or maybe a couple of generations down the line. Anyway, that's my rant. I'm sticking by it. Have a great weekend. See you next week.
Thank you for tuning in to the Ignited Heroes Recovery Podcast. I really hope you found the information here useful and that we'll see you back here next week. And look, I want to make sure that this podcast is the most useful it can be for you, so please let me know by emailing info@ignited.com if there are any specific topics or questions you'd like to have addressed. As usual, if you like this episode, I would love for you to leave us a 5-star review and rating. Thanks, and see you next week.